purposes, and integrating macroeconomic dimension however, today remains limited. So we will go into conversation, but we'll also have the opportunity to have the soft launch of a GGGI new guide on aligning climate and economic planning. So a guide specifically to integrate macroeconomic and in financial dimension, so that we can see the interlink between climate planning and finance into demonstrating the link between the two. So in order for us to dive into the topic, we will have opening remark by Mrs. Amanda McKee from NDCP Partnership, who's welcoming us today. And we will, so with no further ado, please allow me to give you the floor for your introductory remark. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us in the NDC Partnership Pavilion today. So I'm really excited to be opening this event with you. GGGI has been an instrumental member of the NDC Partnership. And this is not just today, but over the years. And I was looking at some of our data before joining and realized GGGI supported 29 countries across the partnership, which is about 25% of all of our members. So not to underestimate the importance of this partnership we have. So to better understand the different country-led mechanisms that are being taken to increase investment through long-term and programmatic approaches, we've actually been working together with GGGI to develop a policy brief outlining country experiences and best practices. And this is something that we're doing through the Task Force for Access to Climate Finance. The NDC Partnership Support Unit hosts the Knowledge Center that supports that work. And this policy brief, which will be launched early next year, focuses on adaptation and builds on our climate investment planning and mobilization framework, which is something we developed with the GCF last year, looking specifically at these enabling conditions that countries have, from the institutional setup to project implementation and sustainability. So really excited to be working on this project with GGGI. And we know that implementing NDCs is fundamentally an economic and a development journey. We are supporting 120 countries through the NDC partnership and working with a large number of them in moving from planning to implementation to an investment. And part of this is working hand in hand with our focal points within the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economy. The challenge that we're seeing is not only the need to raise ambition, but to actually implement measures in a realistic, in a cost-effective, and economically aligned manner. And I know this has always been important, but it's becoming more and more critical and more scrutinized today as well. We know that NDCs carry fiscal, macroeconomic implications, and governments need to prioritize actions as part of this. There's limited public resources. Understanding the impacts on productivity, on employment, on competitiveness, economic stability are critical to be able to inform those decisions that are being made. We are seeing positive trends in the NDCs that are being submitted. So we did an analysis of the first batch of NDCs that were submitted up until the end of September, those that had been supported through the NDC partnership. So analyzed 23, and it showed that every single one of those countries had strengthened the quality of their NDC in one way or another. So this is the underlying elements that are critical to that implementability. And half of those countries demonstrated strong quality improvements. And what that means of the various indicators that we looked at, they had actually strengthened at least 80% of them. So countries are really taking a robust approach to the NDCs. And why is this important? Well, translating climate commitments into fiscal, macroeconomic terms, it informs the economic and fiscal policies that enables integration into national budgets, into medium-term expenditure frameworks, into effective development plans. So implementing NDCs, as with any policy, is going to involve choices, trade-offs, And this is why analytical tools like the one that we're going to hear about today are so critical to anticipate these outcomes, compare the impacts, and really maximize the social, economic, and environmental value. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation, and I'll turn it back to our moderator.
Thank you, Amanda, for the opening remarks, which is setting the scene for us into understanding the need to link macroeconomic data to inform fiscal finance policies and turning into actually national policies and implementation down the line. So in order for us to dive deeper into the topic, we will have a short presentation from the guide that has been mentioned. So a guide elaborated with the GGGI, so on macroeconomic and finance consideration in climate planning. And I think we have a presentation that will run the guide and provide us deeper information on the scene for the conversation.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me well? Good. Okay. So, thanks a lot to the host, NDC Partnership, for hosting this event. Thank you very much, Amanda, for the kind words. Indeed, GGI and NDC Partnership, the last years have formed a strong partnership to accelerate NDC enhancement and implementation, and I think this pavilion couldn't be best for discussing such a topic today. So this is an upcoming publication that we are finalizing at the moment at the Global Green Growth Institute. For those that are not very familiar with the GGI, it's an international intergovernmental organization that aims to support its member and partner countries to follow a green growth model of economic development that's environmentally sustainable and inclusive. So I'm gonna provide you some highlights of the guide, and before I would like to give you a little bit of the context from the global stocktake of the UNFCCC, which emphasizes the role of systemic transformation and economic diversification while meeting development priorities. Urgent climate mitigation action is needed, is required, and already we have cost-effective measures in renewable energy, for instance, or energy efficiency that, apart from being cost-effective, also deliver important socioeconomic benefits. For instance, better health, air pollution reduction, jobs creation, so on and so forth. And it's important to incorporate this, to be able to assess those socioeconomic benefits and include them in the decision making, to provide insights in order to be able to prioritize different measures and compare with the no action scenario. Also, sorry. Another important aspect is that many mitigation and adaptation measures require significant investments, and it's very important to be able to see how these investments will be materialized by which actors, public or private, domestic or foreign, and what will be the implications for the macroeconomic stability of the country, and also taking into account climate-induced physical risks that may turn to financial risks. Lastly, the global stocktake also highlights the urgent need to mobilize financial resources and address the financial barriers And as you know, under the new collective quantified goal of 300 billion per year, this is an amount that developed countries need to provide by 2035. This is far, though, from what is needed based on recent assessments. 1.3 trillion annually is needed by developing countries to follow a low carbon and climate resilient pathway. So, in addition to that, to the global stocktake findings in relation to macroeconomic and finance issues, still we see when support governments to develop their climate plans and strategies having existing gaps. For instance, there is still limited cross-ministerial coordination. We see often that climate plans are developed by the Ministry of Environment without engaging with the Ministry of Finance, or we have a fragmented economic and climate policy making processes, and yeah. So investments, for instance, in infrastructure and providing fossil fuel subsidies may contradict renewable energy policy. So we have this fragmented policy making processes. Also, insufficient integration of macroeconomic and macrofiscal analysis and financial analysis perspectives in climate planning. Weak pipeline development investments, often we see limited capacity to conduct this kind of assessments, macroeconomic, socioeconomic assessments, financial analysis, fiscal analysis, risks, macrofiscal risks, in relation also to gaps of data and analytical tools. So in that context, this guide aims to address these gaps, and it's a practical stepwise guide that provides guidance to policymakers, both policymakers that sit with the ministries of environment in order to incorporate macroeconomic and finance issues in climate planning, but also it's related and targeting also officials and experts from ministries of finance to incorporate the climate layer, the climate angle, climate objectives in finance planning. I would like to say here that we have reviewed other guides and reports in that space, and indeed that they cover either more on the financial aspect or more the climate planning aspect or the macroeconomy aspect, but we haven't seen a guide that incorporates all three dimensions and pillars in one guide to provide a step-by-step approach with practical country examples and tools, analytical tools that, depending on the capacities and the needs of the country, can utilize for their climate planning and macroeconomic and financial analysis. So this guide looks on 8 stages of climate planning and finance and implementation, and it approaches the climate planning and finance and implementation as a continuum, as an integrated approach, and policymakers and practitioners could utilize this guide either during the climate planning process, developing NDCs, LTLEDs, or after having developed those climate policies, plans and strategies to make sure that conduct additional socioeconomic analysis and move from climate planning to finance and implementation. The 8 stages that we have identified to provide support. The first one is on governance, structure, and coordination. The idea is to engage with the related ministries like the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Economic Planning and Development, and also setting a cross-ministerial coordination committee from the outset of the process. The next one focuses on policy landscape and taking stock on existing plans and policies, both on the climate side but also on the economic side, to see and make sure that those are taken into account when developing a climate planning process, and it's an integrated one. Also, of course, taking stock of and collecting data around the macroeconomic indicators, and lastly, also looking on a coherent framework between climate planning and economic planning. As you can see, the next step is the next stage is an integrated macroeconomic analysis framework that aims to analyze and assess the different low carbon and climate resilient pathways. And here we look on mitigation, adaptation, and loss and damage. So in each stage, we include different types of assessment and analysis that countries, based on their needs, they could undertake, right? So they could assess the costs and benefits of mitigation actions, or they could assess the employment benefits, jobs creation from low carbon and climate resilient pathways. They could also see the distributional effects of those costs and benefits across different groups. And we provide different methods and tools for the different approaches on mitigation, adaptation, and loss and damage, which is also very important, understanding the potential losses and damages without taking any climate adaptation action, and what would be the case by incorporating adaptation measures, how much they will cost, and how those will compare with the no action scenario by reducing the potential losses and damages. So we provide this type of tools and methods there. The next stage focuses more on the finance analysis and planning, looking on the investment needs, current financial flows, identifying the financial gaps, looking on what type of finance instruments will be available to bridge this gap, looking on different climate finance instruments or carbon finance instruments under Article 6. This is very relevant and very important. So we see that could be also incorporated there, and based on that to prioritize different investments measures based on the socioeconomic assessment that was mentioned before. Fiscal policy analysis is a very important one. Often countries explore different fiscal policy instruments like energy taxation or carbon taxation or fossil fuel subsidy reform. So those are important assessments that should be done in order to understand what will be the implications in the macroeconomy, what will be the implications with regard to revenues for the government, what will be the implications for different socioeconomic groups. And lastly, on the last stage on implementation and monitoring, the idea is to mainstream climate change, the climate layer in budgeting processes, developing an integrated monitoring and evaluation system where both climate and macroeconomic issues are addressed. Budget tagging also, it's another tool that countries could utilize. So I would like to emphasize here that the guide provides, it's a very practical step-by-step approach and provides good practices from different countries that other countries could learn. And of course, this is a process going through these 8 stages. Countries could pick and select the ones that fit their needs and priorities. As I mentioned before, there are different analytical tools and assessment tools that we incorporate in the guide here we have listed some related to cost-benefit analysis, input-output analysis for employment assessment, financial gap analysis, macroeconomic financial analysis, fiscal impact analysis, so on and so forth. So there is quite a number of tools and methods for different stages of the climate planning and financing process. And with that, I would like to close and say that this upcoming publication is part of a series of publications that we develop in the Global Green Growth Institute, aiming to collect good practices and lessons learned from different countries that we work to consolidate, synthesize, and share those practices as knowledge products, so where other countries could learn from. And lastly, you can access the summary of this guide. This is already online, and we plan to replace the summary with the upcoming publication. So please feel free to get your phone and through the QR code to access the summary. And we have one more QR code on another summary of another upcoming publication, which is relevant to that. An exercise in Colombia assessing different scenarios from a macroeconomic perspective, looking on Colombia's participation in Article 6, so looking on different scenarios of Colombia's participation in Article 6. And with that, I would like to thank you for coming, your attention, and I look forward actually to hear really from the experts on the ground to share their experiences. And of course, we have another distinguished panelist also to share some tools and experience from their work. So I will pass it over to the moderator.
Thank you, Stelios, for the great presentation on the upcoming guide. We've seen in-depth practical guide for bringing macroeconomic analysis with tools available for countries to go in-depth into supporting planning and increase of climate finance. So with that opening remark and presentation, thank you, Stelios. I would like to call now for our panel discussion to reflect on this tool and avenues. And for that, we will have three distinguished panelists. Mrs. Vivian Foster from Climate Compatible Growth. Thank you. Professor Georges Quadio, Technical Advisor to the Minister of Environment and Sustainable Development of Côte d'Ivoire. And Dr. Sam Mugume, Assistant Commissioner, Macroeconomic Policy Department, Ministry of Finance, Uganda. Yes. Can you hear me? I'm not sure it's clear. So I think we sometimes have noise in the conversation, but okay. Good. All right, so thank you for being with us. We will have different perspective from organization and country perspective to discuss about the tools and integration of macroeconomic perspective. Perhaps to start with, maybe we can have a first initial reaction and reflection on the guide presented and how in your country it is currently perceived. What is the current stage? If we could start with Uganda, for instance, how is it currently reflected, and what are how is the country incorporating macroeconomic tools at the moment when it comes to financial consideration for climate plans?
Yeah, great, thank you. It's a big opportunity really for me to be here, and thank you for inviting me. Dennis, thank you for calling me upon to come here, and Amanda, thank you, and Stelos. It's a great presentation for me, and one, I will speak for Uganda. I'm from Macroeconomic Policy Department here, but I also speak for the Coalition of Finance Ministers on Climate Action, because we are the co-chairs, which is very, and GGI is an institutional partner, and NDCP, so we're in the right place, and Sharon is there, the secretary, she's coming. So the first thing is, well done, it's a good job, well done, because integrating macroeconomic objectives in climate change action is very critical, but it's difficult, and sometimes not done well or underscored. And there are many reasons to this. One is historical reasons. We, Minister of Finance and macroeconomic analysts, we used to think this is an environmental issue. There are issues like you talked about, the challenge of financial, the deficit, and the choice. What do I invest? Do I invest in long-term resilient things compared to the day-to-day issues someone has to eat? I have to provide something sitting on those areas. So these are big challenges for Minister of Finance. So number one, having a guide that can help us speak to this is very, very key, and I would like to applaud you. The point is, if you listen to Nick Stern, recently last week released his book, it's no longer choice now, development and conservation. It's, climate action. Climate action leads to development. And definitely we need to come in strongly with the macroeconomic objectives and monetary stability indicators and growth and employment. These are the set. When I was looking at your presentation there, I was like, I should have put economic stability and growth and development at the center. I put climate action. I put global, geopolitical tensions and security this side. So that which is the same way of saying the thing in a different way. But the point is, integrating these is very, very critical. And when I'm thinking about the macroeconomic objectives to address and the monetary objective, and the physical, I should be able to think greatly about climate action and the shocks that are coming. In Uganda, we've realized this a lot. We've seen in different years when there are droughts, when there are floods, growth goes down, revenue goes down, expenditure rises, the deficit is high. And so to address this is a big question, and that's why we get very, very interested as Minister of Finance in Uganda about the climate action. One is having a strong climate finance unit has been our number one target. And a number of things have happened. We've had a financing strategy developed for the country. We're going to budget tagging strongly. We're doing physical risk assessment. We have these tools and to help us. We've gone ahead we have some tools that we're using for modeling, economic modeling and analysis, looking at the benefits and the challenges and the opportunities. And we've run some models and we've written some papers. We've done natural capital accounting. We are doing adjusted macroeconomic indicators, all these to support the planning and the realization that the objectives must be met. But there's a challenge. The challenge comes back to me from Macroeconomic Policy Department when I'm saying the resource envelope should remain, $1 million US. And the budget department is bringing, but if you're talking about climate, resilient investments, it's going to be 300, 3 million USDs. That's an example. So where is the balance? Then the question comes, did you analyze, did you look at these impacts? But the guide and what we're talking about clearly speaks for this. And thank you. I should stop here.
Can hear.
You can hear now. I want to go now from Uganda to the Coalition of Finance Ministers on Climate Action. We are 100 member countries. And all that we do is to make sure that Ministers of Finance engage more in climate action, in aligning the NAPs, the NDCs, to our macroeconomic objectives and fiscal policies. And we are learning. It's peer-to-peer learning, having knowledge products, and sharing the best practices. I've seen over the 5 years, there has been an improvement with different countries, including mine in Uganda, but not yet well done. We still need some instruments and guides like these ones to make it better. I want to stop here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It was a great introduction to how macroeconomic tools are used actually in Uganda and also in some of your units. You mentioned also the climate finance units and the platform for finance ministers. So I think we'll come back to it in details. Other examples. I'd like to go to Côte d'Ivoire from a government perspective as well. How is it that today you're incorporating macroeconomic tools and aspect for financial consideration when it comes to climate planning?
Okay. Thank you, my sister. And it is an opportunity for Côte d'Ivoire to be invited by GGI and NDC partnership to be here this afternoon to discuss about the climate change response. And according to my country, we integrate the issue of climate change in our new national development plan. Because before of that, you have a report of the World Bank concerning climate and development. It is like an alert to us to know that without this integration of climate change and policy and all we done, the solution doesn't come. And your presentation, I think that we follow these steps. First, we reinforce our governance capacity by putting in place a new steering committee which involves key partners, financial, Minister of Development Plan, science, all the stakeholders engaged in climate solution in our country. And now with our new NDC, we integrate all the sector by putting climate change in all the measures we have to take in order to achieve Paris Agreement. And recently, according to the Global Environmental Outlook 7 report, we are now in many factors have achieved the tipping point. And the question is very serious for us. The last model doesn't operate now. And I think the solution comes from this new concept. And for our country, we are on the way. We do our best to integrate all the solutions in our national development plan. And I think now, if you don't do that, you don't have a clear vision to have the best solution for the community. And for us, it is a good lesson, a good document, a good guide. We will try to integrate this lesson in our national plan of development. Thank you very much for this a new thinking about climate change response. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Kwadjo, for the introduction into how climate policy is developed in Cote d'Ivoire, looking through the lens of the NDC, actually, National Determined Contribution, where you have focused on making sure that country priorities are designed into effective actions and responses. So from your perspective, Mrs. Vivienne, at Climate Growth, how do you reflect on the tools and on macroeconomic, and what are, from your experience, what have you seen in terms of gaps and challenges to use those tools when it comes to climate planning?
Great, thank you so much. Very much appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today to join this important conversation, and appreciate the partnership with GGGI. So I'm representing a group called Climate Compatible Growth. We're an FCDO UK aid-funded consortium of leading universities providing technical support on climate transition to countries in the global south. We work a lot with policymakers, but also with university counterparts in the countries where we're active, mainly in Africa, but also in developing Asia. The framework that we've used to think about this problem, we refer to as data to deal. Data to deal is a framework that is based on looking at some successful experiences of mobilizing finance for climate transition, mainly from the Latin America region. And more recently, we've begun to experiment with this approach in the African context. Data to deal involves 7 components, but it combines a lot of qualitative aspects, such as political facilitation, aligning development and climate vision, stakeholder consultation, capacity building, so those more qualitative aspects, with more quantitative aspects, where we particularly look at how to produce sound technical plans, and then how to do policy reforms that create the conditions for those plans to be financed at an affordable cost. So there's a real triangle between planning, the policy environment, and the ability to finance the plans. We recently just put out a series of briefs that look at different aspects of data to deal, so I wanted to just briefly mention that. But what I'd like to focus on is the modeling aspect of data to deal. So alongside the facilitation process, we've developed a suite of open source modeling tools which countries can easily access and cover different aspects of the climate transition. So some of those are in the classical planning space, system capacity expansion, electrification planning, and so on. But more recently, we've been focusing on the right-hand side on developing tools that support the financing of plans. Because what we've observed is that while countries have made a lot of progress in producing technically sound plans for the transition, many of those plans read a bit like science fiction from a financing perspective. Because when you look at the surge of investment that's needed to meet net zero targets, it's unprecedented in its scale. And therefore, the financing really merits close attention. And often that comes a little bit at the end of the process, which is why we really welcome this approach to integrating finance earlier. I'd like to share with you briefly 3 tools that we've been working on, and I'm going to take them in a slightly different order. The first tool is called Model for Informed National Financing. And what it does is that it enables a country to take the plan and ingest it into a model that then calculates the cost of the plan. The model takes into account the conditions on which a country can access finance, which of course vary hugely across countries. And it calculates, if you like, the mortgage payment for net zero. What is going to be that recurring payment that will make this investment plan financeable? And then it contrasts that with the sector cash flows that are available within the sector. So it might be user tariffs for energy, it might be budget commitments, and so on. And it enables you to see whether there's a climate financing gap or not. The model can also be used to take the plan apart into prototype projects and explore the bankability of those projects at the individual project scale. And the question that we think is important is that since countries face a limited envelope of concessional finance, what is the optimal allocation of the concessional finance across different project types? Some technologies need much more concessional finance than others. So this tool allows us to explore what is the most financially efficient place to put the concessional money. and what is the most financially efficient place to put the domestic local currency finance, which again is also a limited resource. So this is our sort of overarching tool that I wanted to mention. But as sort of complements, one of the things that we've discovered in engaging with countries is that they find the climate finance landscape quite challenging to navigate. There's many different climate finance windows. They have different eligibility conditions, different financing conditions, and countries can get a little bit lost in that landscape. So this tool that's called FinTrack essentially brings information on all the available climate finance sources into one dashboard, and it allows countries to search which of these funds they're eligible for, what would be the eligibility criteria they'd have to meet to access the funds, and how concessional would be the resulting money and on what scale. So here's a sort of example here that's done at the global scale, where we plot the concessionality of the resources against the complexity of the process of accessing resources, and the bubbles represent the scale of the money. So you can see that the big red blobs at the bottom are the development finance climate labeled or climate targeted envelopes. Those are very large pots of money. They're relatively easier to access, but they're less concessional in nature. Whereas the blue bubbles are the more dedicated climate finance windows, such as GCF or GEF and so on, where the pots of money are smaller, the concessionality is higher, but so is the complexity of accessing. So this tool is really to support countries to navigate the landscape and identify the most promising combination of windows. And then finally, another challenge that we've found in trying to model the affordability of the financing is that there's very little public information on the cost of capital from international commercial sources. So this tool, which is called FinCore, estimates the cost of capital mainly for renewables, but also for some other technologies. It allows you to build up an estimate of what the cost of capital is likely to be from international commercial sources. And that then enables you to calculate your mortgage payment for net zero. So I'll leave it there. Sorry, just to leave you there with these are the three tools that I've mentioned, and this is the link to the sort of open source material on them. But we're very excited to be engaging in this space in terms of climate finance tools. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vivienne, for the great presentation. Actually, specific in terms of additional tools, FinTrack, FinCore, and data to deal. Yeah. So really around data collection for either information about finance flow, for tracking of finance available, but also how finance can be then properly allocated when it comes to priority at country level. So I think this enables us to reflect on how, as a country or a government, you are enabled now to navigate with the tools available, but then to properly integrate most of the perspective into the necessary planning and prioritization among the issues and pressing elements to solve. And from also what Mrs. Vivienne was mentioning, how are you sure that the best funding are leveraged for the proper solution or for the proper issues, right? So how is it informed depending on the institutional framework or governance challenge that you have, that the tools enables to provide a proper indicative guidance for targeted addressed. So I'd like to understand from in Uganda, if you can provide us a more in-depth guidance as to how some of the, and you know we are also at the UNFCCC conventions where we have the transparency framework that enables us to look into tracking for financial. So how are you using that under the macroeconomic perspective, right, but also some of the tracking tools to inform your decision and also accelerate climate finance access for the country?
Thank you so much, my panelists. Really, that was very great and brilliant. And the catalog of tools really is very critical, which would happily want to use. We've not used these tools, these ones in Uganda, but we've used others. We've done some analytical work. We, for example, we prepared the CCDR, Climate Change Development Report, and we used a tailor-made model called Yuga mode, but based on the MOF mode of the World Bank, and we did also the physical risk assessment, of climate change, report. Also, we do have. Also, we use some models. We used mostly the IMF-based models. But again, we have our own integrated macroeconomic model that we use based on the social accounting matrix or sum. And we've extended the sum to take care of some, put matrices on like land, like pollution, like water use and energy, which helps us as we model to integrate these. So their reports are there, some technical reports. The last report we're looking at, which we wrote with my colleagues, is we're looking at investment in natural capital and its resultant impact on the macroeconomic objectives, employment, and we dealt with forestry, and we shocked with very little money, Uganda money, 1 billion, and we saw the results are going, they're very, very good. This is there, and there's appreciation for this. But the challenge remains when using these tools. One is the data that you put in gives you the results, so the data is very critical. The capacity for these countries, and my country also involved, you can't say 1 or 2, 3 people able to use these tools, so we need to improve on that. We need also to look at the other. You see, a country's budget is not only a technical document, it's both political, social document. So how do we combine these? If you're seated really in the budget office or the director of economic affairs and you're looking at this, so it's not as easy as we say it, but good that the tools are there to inform us technically, and we run them and see this. So these tools will tell us, you do all these tools and run them, but back you sit in the boardrooms and you're pulling, you're pulling ropes, this and this. But we are moving on, and it's been very, very helpful. The knowledge, looking at investment, for example, in adaptation, and seeing the results that come long-term versus short-term. We invested in a road, Entebbe to Kampala Express Highway, which has helped really reduce, and it's going over swamps and running. But this was as a result of such analysis and the benefits. It's one of the expensive roads on the continent, but we know why. And people complained until floods started taking roads in Kampala. They said, oh, this happened. Okay, then this money well spent, a little here. So these are things that are happening gradually. We don't expect them to change, but we need to do still more work, increase capacity in terms of use, but also capacity to understand the reports by the policy people. We need these workshops and seminars for politicians at that level at some point. There's another big point that when you're looking at balloons here, there was red, blue, and whichever color, but I saw red, which is less concessional. And that tells me, when you look at most of private financing is not coming in here. So as public, how do we bring enablers to bring in crowd in private financing? You need to invest. But what do you invest? Where do you get the money? I'll run this tool and see if the money comes. But I know it's not going to be highly concessional, and that raises the debt issue. And countries are facing this. But we are trying also as a country now, what we are trying to do, we've looked at the debt framework, debt analysis framework, the standard tool, and we're trying to put in resilience and adaptation investments. The tool doesn't have, but we're doing, with some partners, we're working on that to see what is the effect so that we can change the narrative. We can still get the rating bad, but the narrative will show, at least there's investment in this, and the future is going to be good. So these tools are helping us. We are using them. They've changed some of the investments that we put it for the examples, but still, there's still much more work that we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your your insight. Okay, I don't know if you hear me. Yes, okay. So in reflecting also on the transparency mechanism and also on the tracking mechanism in Côte d'Ivoire, I would like to see how those elements of building more visibility in terms of data are enabling sound decision when it comes to accelerating access to climate finance.
Thank you very much. Uh, in the when we start to understand climate change, we have many models, and in the progress, you have to combine different models in order to find the the reason of climate change. And now you agree that human being is the key responsible of climate change. According to financial model and the climate change model to be together, you have many models to give to Africa some response. Now we need three things to use this kind of model. The first, to put in place dialogue between science and policy makers. It is very important. But as you know, in Africa, we have science in one side and the political makers in one side. We need to integrate these two structures very closely in order to have the factors that we can put in the model in order to find our own solutions. It is very important, because if you use the model come in everywhere in science, the base is correct, but the data put in the model, it is more important for us. And we need to compare. The second thing is to compare the result of different models and the gap between the different models. We can use the data. We need to have the better response to climate solutions. It is the second. And finally, we need to collaborate each other in science domain in order to collapse our experience, in order to help each other to find the better solution. Now you use Paris Agreement, Article 13 to 15, like a system of national transparency system. You use it, but you progress slowly in order to have the good data to inform the political measure in order to progress very quickly, because the populations the communities is very impacted by the climate change, and they need the quick response for the government, that you can use this kind of model in order to help us go very fast. Because if you go very fast without learn what you are going to find, we will put in a big hole. It is not the solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Kwadjo. Indeed, deep dive in terms of, needs in terms of sound data and assessment of the different models. I think it's a good food for thought, actually, for government to reflect on how to improve what is existing and how to absorb a lot of those tools, guides, models in order to enable sound prioritization of climate finance. And I think you were mentioning also in Uganda earlier that you are looking into moving away from debt mechanism, right? And how, if we look at some of these elements available, some of these modeling available, how can we actually accelerate access to private capital, going away from banks and from traditional finances, right? In your perspective, how can we, I mean, if you have already done or used an examples, how can we emphasize more in terms of those innovative tools that are available to us in terms of also climate finance? If we look into carbon market, if we look into green bonds, and I think it will be our last round of contribution. So looking to moving away, using some of those tools from traditional finance, and how can we use those mechanisms?
Very good question, because now it tells me public finance you can rest a little. So how do we get private sector? One thing, private sector is profit driven. If there are no profits, private sector is not going to come by. And if you look at climate action investments, go to adaptation especially, the profits are marginal, if at all they are realized. Maybe mitigations, probably you may get some profits if you go to a good business. So how do you attract private investments in a country, both domestic and foreign? One is to de-risk the investments as a public, for public. And how do you de-risk them? You will invest in enablers, provided they reduce the taxes, put infrastructure in place, make sure business is running, and you can only do this after understanding the impact. So these tools are critical to bring us to that, for public investment will not run away. But again, the tools to show that long-term investment in adaptation, is profitable. And this is going to be a catalog going to the investors, to inform our taxonomies. What are the investments that we think are green, and what are the benefits over time? Probably I don't know if we have some of those tools to measure that, over time, and what investments do you put, and so those can crowd in investments. As public is investing in the enablers, here we are giving information. When you look more, you see in a country, if you're going to attract foreign investments, for example, and live on concessional financing and getting, for loans that are really good, you need to provide the profile. So what is the profile of your investments in green, in adaptation? Is it going to be beneficial? You need to have tools. These tools are going to inform you and to inform the rest. That's why when we look, we're not running away from debt sustainability analysis and report. It's critical for me, because for me that's a very, very good report, because it tells an investor that if you invest in country X, or if you give money to country X, there's a likelihood that you may not get it back. Therefore, put the interest high to cover the losses and the insurance. And now, if our narrative that we bring out is, look here, yes, we are hyping the risks coming as out of climate change shocks. We hype them when you're in the framework right now. But we're not looking at the benefits. And these benefits are critical. And most countries are going to get money to invest them through loans, and they create the debt portfolio. Can we look them at long term and have the narrative and say, if you're getting loans or money to invest in maybe, let's say, drought-resistant crops, resilient infrastructure, human capacity building, that's long-term investment for the country, then there's a likelihood that 10, 20, 30, 40 years, you'll stand a bigger opportunity to pay back than you have now, and we put it in the narrative. So these are things that we want, and they will form us, and the tools will help us to do that. But like my professor said, we need to bring this to the table, all of us, to discuss it and understand it. I thank you.
Thank you indeed. So in I think we are almost out of time, but so in your perspective, your final
I'd like to sort of close the loop here because what we found in our work on FinCore is that country risk is often the highest contributor to the cost of capital. It can increase the cost of renewable energy, cost of capital 2 to 3 times. And therefore, I think there's a real virtuous loop between just delivering on macroeconomic stability on the one hand, but also stable policy environments at the sector level can be a really important route to making the transition more affordable. So I think that link between the policy environment and the cost of capital is very fundamental. I finally just wanted to also acknowledge the professor's point about the science policy interface. This is something that we believe very strongly in, and we do a lot of capacity building work, and we have in our classrooms university, local academics and policymakers studying side by side, learning to use the tools. Because often the technical capacity is in country, but it's not listened to by the policymakers, and the university academics maybe don't have the confidence or the ability to communicate across that science policy interface. So very much agree with the professor that that's a critical area. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much to invite us, Côte d'Ivoire, to be here. You are very, very, very happy. But my final word is that said my minister, without the private sector, no development, no solution for climate change. To implement our national development plan, the contribution of private sector is about 70% to our budget. And the second message is that our Ministry of Finance, Development Plan, Environment work together to find the best solution to a win-win business. The second, and finally, you put in place all the procedure for market carbon desk. It is operate now in Côte d'Ivoire. Come and together we can change the world with the framework of regulation. And we have also a national portfolio concerning 15 bankable projects. You can send you the QR code in order to find this opportunity for all of the planet. Thank you very much to invite Côte d'Ivoire in this side event. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the missing link, I'm not sure there is a missing link now. We've bridged the gap into macroeconomic and planning. So I'd like to thank our panelists. We have a closing remark from Mr. Ventura from UNFCCC. So if you will allow us to close this panel with the words of wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you for the wonderful moderation and also the interesting discussion before. So we heard from the guidance on overall having a holistic, the importance of having a holistic approach. It is a moment for implementation. I think this is what the COP is echoing now, and what we are going to hear as an outcome of this COP is like we need to accelerate implementation. You know, the things should have started long ago. We were starting developing and communicating NDCs, INDCs those days in 2015, and we had now the 2 rounds of NDCs that are completing, and it's about how we actually implement those commitments. 2030 is approaching fast. You know, when we are talking sometimes about the next round of NDCs, but if we don't have implementation on the ground, we won't have another round of NDCs. So it is important that we do focus and accelerate on this round of NDCs like that are having 2030 targets, but also now we have the 2035 targets in place. And it's important to accelerate implementation, and finance is the key to drive in this implementation, together with, of course, the technology transfer and capacity building as means of implementation. And this is already the second day of the COP, and we are hearing this in many of the even this agenda item discussions in the negotiation rooms. but also in all the events that are happening outside the negotiation rooms as well. And countries are more and more feeling it. Those who are responsible for driving the implementation know that this is not an effort that is left to one ministry. It's about coordination, a whole of government effort, whole of society effort. And this is why it is important that we have more information-based decision making that would drive this, that would actually give us like choosing the optimum solutions. Because we need to ensure that like the investments, the limited funding we have, like from concessional finance we get, we are able to leverage those and to ensure that it makes the maximum impact on the ground. And for that, we need to have informed decisions. And the tools that we heard, both in this, that will enable in decision making, but also identifying the right sources of finance, and also tracking the finance finally on in terms of reporting is key. So hopefully the tools that we've seen and the examples we heard from the Uganda and Cote d'Ivoire from Africa is helpful for the other countries. And we hope that we see more action that's happening on the ground, driven by these best examples and also the tools and the guidance that are being provided. Thank you.
Thank you for your remarks. I think this is the end of the panel. I'd like to thank again the panelists and contributors from Cote d'Ivoire, Uganda, Climate Growth, and UNFCCC, as well as NDCP, partnership, for inviting us today. Thank you so much, and GGGI with the Stelios presentation. Thank you.